Thundering hooves shake the vast Eurasian steppe as nomadic warriors charge across the endless grass. These are the Scythians, masters of the ancient world on horseback. They were so feared by the Persian Empire that massive armies failed to conquer them, and so admired by the Greeks that their legends were woven into epic tales. Yet the true story of these horse lords remained a secret for centuries, buried in frozen tombs and whispered in fragments. You are about to uncover their complete hidden history, from the golden treasures they took to the grave to the shocking rituals that defined their culture. We will unearth why a powerful civilization vanished and what frozen mummies can tell us about their lives. What do you believe is the greatest secret a lost civilization can keep? The Scythians were a people defined by the horizon. They were not one single kingdom with a capital city, but a sprawling network of powerful, Iranic-speaking tribes who commanded a staggering expanse of land. Their domain stretched from the icy fringes of Siberia all the way to the shores of the Black Sea, a reign that lasted for over 1,000 years, from roughly the 9th century before the Common Era to the 4th century after it. To understand them, you must first forget everything you know about ancient empires built of stone. Their world was one of motion, a civilization on the move. They lived in wagons and felt tents, their entire society organized around the herds they followed and the horses they mastered. This made them fundamentally alien to the settled, walled civilizations who watched them from the south and west. To the Greeks, the Persians, and the Chinese, the Scythians were like a force of nature, unpredictable and unstoppable. This brings us to the central mystery of their story. The Scythians left us no written history of their own. They built no libraries and carved no royal proclamations into stone. Everything we know comes from two sources, the words of others and the treasures they took to their graves. We hear about them through the often exaggerated accounts of their enemies and intrigued neighbors, like the Greek historian Herodotus, and we see them through the incredible artifacts recovered from their burial mounds, the kurgans, which held their secrets frozen in time for millennia. So we are left to piece together their true identity from the outside looking in, and from the stunning golden legacy they left beneath the earth. Their world was a sea of grass, a seemingly infinite expanse known as the Eurasian steppe. This was the stage for their civilization, a corridor of life stretching from the Danube River in the west all the way to the formidable Altai Mountains in the east. This was not an empire with fixed borders on a map, but a fluid realm of influence controlled by a constellation of tribes, all sharing the Scythian name and spirit. Within this vast domain, a clear hierarchy existed. At the top were the royal Scythians, the warrior elite who held ultimate power and claimed the best pastures. They were the ones who led the great raids and received tribute from the tribes they dominated. Then there were the nomadic Scythians, the bulk of the population who lived a life entirely on the move with their herds. And interestingly, there were also Scythians who farmed, settling in the fertile river valleys to grow grain, showing a surprising adaptability within their nomadic core. This immense landscape dictated every aspect of their existence. The steppe is an environment of extreme openness and little shelter, where survival depends on mobility and the ability to see threats from a great distance. Can you picture a land with no forests to hide in, no mountains to retreat to, just an unbroken horizon in every direction? This is why the horse became their extension, the key to their very being. A Scythian learned to ride almost as soon as he could walk. Their entire economy revolved around their herds of cattle, sheep, and most importantly, horses. This constant life in the saddle forged them into the ancient world's most formidable cavalry. They were not just riders, they were centaurs fused with their horses. They developed the compound bow, a masterpiece of engineering short enough to use from horseback yet powerful enough to pierce armor. Their signature tactic was the feigned retreat, where they would shower an enemy with arrows while appearing to flee, only to whirl around and finish the disorganized pursuers. Against the slow, heavy infantry of settled empires, this was an unstoppable strategy. The open steppe made them masters of hit-and-run warfare, and their entire culture, from their diet of mare's milk and meat to their gods of the sky and wind, was a direct reflection of the boundless grasslands they called home. Our window into this world of horse lords comes from a single, remarkable Greek historian named Herodotus. He traveled to the bustling Greek colonies on the Black Sea coast, places where Greek merchants and Scythian nomads met and traded stories. There, with a curious mind and a ready ear, he collected the tales that would make the Scythians legendary. He wrote down everything he heard, creating the first extensive portrait of these mysterious people. He recorded their origin myth, which spoke of a first man named Togetaus and his 3 sons, who became the fathers of the main tribes. He described their nomadic life in vivid detail, how they carried their homes in wagons and lived on the milk of their mares. He marveled at their fierce resistance against the Persian king Darius, who led a colossal army of 700,000 men into the steppe to punish them. According to Herodotus, the Scythians refused to stand and fight a conventional battle. Instead, they simply melted away into the vastness of their land, leading the Persians on a fruitless, exhausting chase. They poisoned wells and burned the grass until Darius' great army, starving and demoralized, was forced to retreat in disgrace. It was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare, a testament to their deep understanding of their own environment. Yet Herodotus also recorded customs that seem pulled from a dark fable. He wrote of elaborate funeral rites for kings, where mourners would gash their faces and drink the blood of sacrificed servants. He described strange vapor baths and warriors who swore oaths by drinking blood from a sacred cup. This is where the historical debate ignites. How much of this can we truly believe? Herodotus was often called the father of history, but also the father of lies. He reported what he was told, and some of his sources were undoubtedly spinning tall tales for the foreign visitor. The blood drinking and the fantastical rituals might be exaggerations or misunderstandings of complex spiritual practices, but modern archaeology has performed a miracle. It has begun to vindicate Herodotus in astonishing ways. The frozen tombs of the Altai Mountains have revealed Scythian chiefs buried with sacrificed horses and servants, just as he described. Traces of cannabis vapors have been found in burial tents, confirming his accounts of their ritual use. So while we must read his stories with a critical eye, we cannot dismiss them. Herodotus provides the essential narrative thread, the first draft of a history that we are only now, 2,500 years later, learning to read for ourselves. The words of Herodotus were one thing, but proof was another matter entirely. That proof arrived from the most unforgiving place imaginable, the high valleys of the Altai Mountains in Siberia. Here, in a series of large burial mounds known as kurgans, the earth itself had conspired to keep the Scythian secret. But in the 1920s, a Soviet archaeologist named Sergei Rudenko began to unravel the mystery. His work, interrupted by war and resumed in the 1940s, would lead to one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, the Pazyryk burials. The key to this incredible preservation was the permafrost, the permanently frozen ground that lay just beneath the surface. The Scythians had constructed their tombs with ingenious foresight, piling stones and earth into mounds that acted like a cap, allowing water to seep in and freeze during the summer thaw. This water then solidified into massive blocks of ice, encasing the entire burial chamber in a natural deep freeze for over 2,000 years. When Rudenko and his team finally broke through into these sealed chambers, they were not greeted by dust and decay, but by a world frozen in time. They found the bodies of Scythian chieftains and their companions, their skin and tattoos perfectly preserved. Elaborate felt wall hangings depicting mythical creatures still hung on the walls of a burial tent. There were entire chariots frozen in place and the mummified remains of sacrificed horses, their ornate leather saddles and headdresses intact. they discovered a wool pile carpet considered the oldest in the world, its intricate patterns still vibrant. This was not just a collection of artifacts, it was a snapshot of a living culture. The Pazyryk burials provided the tangible evidence that transformed the Scythians from figures of Greek legend into a fully realized civilization. Every piece of frozen wood, every stitch of colorful felt, and every intricate tattoo was a direct message from the past, confirming and expanding upon the ancient stories in ways no one had ever dreamed possible. Among the most breathtaking finds from these frozen tombs was a discovery made in 1993. On the remote Yukok Plateau, archaeologists uncovered the burial of a woman who would become known as the Siberian Ice Maiden. Her chamber was a log cabin built of larch, buried deep within the earth and sealed by the permafrost. When they opened it, they found a scene suspended in time. The woman lay on her side, as if sleeping, her body covered from shoulders to wrists in incredibly detailed tattoos. These were not simple markings, but elaborate artistic scenes depicting fantastical animals, stags with griffin heads and great cats locked in eternal struggle. Her clothing and headdress were equally magnificent, a tall, elaborate construction of felt and gold that would have made her a towering, imposing figure in life. Beside her lay a small wooden table holding a meal for the afterlife, a bronze mirror, and a delicate pouch filled with cannabis. This was not the burial of an ordinary person. The quality of her grave goods, the sacred nature of her possessions, and the sheer effort of her interment all point to a person of immense importance. She may have been a priestess, a storyteller, a healer, or even a noble warrior. Her body tells a story of a life on horseback with physical signs of riding, and yet she was laid to rest with the highest honors her culture could bestow. She was not alone in her frozen slumber. Other tombs revealed equally vivid individuals, like a tattooed chieftain whose own skin was a canvas of mythical beasts. These preserved bodies give us something no written account ever could, the actual faces and forms of the Scythians. We can see the lines on their faces, the artistry in their tattoos, and the tools they held sacred. They were real people with their own ideas of beauty, status, and spirituality, frozen in a moment of profound transition between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The skin of the Ice Maiden was not just decorated, it was a living manuscript written in a language of beasts. This same language, known to scholars as the animal style, covers every object the Scythians held dear. Picture a golden stag, its legs folded beneath its body in a graceful leap, yet its immense antlers flowing back over its spine in a perfect, fluid circle. Imagine a panther, its body coiled into a tight spiral, its head turned to snarl over its own shoulder. These are not static portraits from nature. They are creatures of energy and myth, captured in moments of tense, coiled power or locked in eternal, symbolic combat. An eagle's talons clutch a stag's head, a griffin tears at a horse's flank. This art is everywhere, hammered into golden plaques that adorn their clothing, cast into the hilts of their daggers, and carved into the wooden sheaths of their whips. It is a visual universe dominated by the animal world, rendered with a breathtaking blend of realism and wild abstraction. But why did a people so practical, so focused on survival, pour such incredible skill into this singular artistic vision? This was never just decoration. Each twisted feline and soaring eagle was a symbol, a key to their spiritual beliefs. In a world where every hunt could mean life or death, and where clans identified with powerful animal spirits, these images were a form of magic. A stag might represent speed and the sustenance of the herd. A predator like a panther embodied ferocity and strength. By wearing these forms, a warrior might be seeking to absorb the creature's power, to call upon its spirit for protection or success in the hunt. The constant scenes of struggle could represent the eternal cycle of life and death on the steppe, or the shamanic journey between the earthly world and the spirit realm. The Scythian metalworker was a shaman of a different kind, a master of fire and metal who could trap a spirit in a sheet of gold. They worked with a sophisticated understanding of bronze, iron, and especially gold, which they lavished on their most important possessions. They used techniques like lost wax casting to create intricate three-dimensional figures, and hammered delicate sheets of gold over carved molds to produce the famous plaques that shimmered on their tunics. The art was meant to be seen in motion on a galloping horse or a walking chieftain, the light catching the curves of a contorted beast, bringing the symbol to life. This was a portable art for a portable people, a sacred code that moved with them across the sea of grass, telling stories of power, belief, and their intimate, brutal connection to the wild. This artistic language of beasts reached its ultimate expression in a material that seemed to capture the very light of the sun, gold. While the frozen kurgans of Siberia preserved organic materials, the burial mounds of the Crimean steppe, like Kul Oba and Soloka, revealed a different kind of splendor, glittering hoards of golden wealth that defy imagination. These were the treasures of the Scythian elite, objects so masterfully crafted they still take your breath away centuries later. One piece stands above all others, a masterpiece known as the Golden Pectoral from the Tofsta Moila burial mound. Imagine a heavy, crescent-shaped collar of solid gold, weighing over 2.5 pounds, worn over the chest of a Scythian king. It is divided into 3 intricate registers, a miniature world in gleaming metal. The outer bands are a menagerie of the animal style, with lions and horses, griffins and stags, all locked in their eternal, spiraling struggles. But the central band is something entirely different, a breathtaking glimpse into daily Scythian life. Here, 2 Scythians sew a fleece shirt, their faces calm and focused. Another pair tends to a wounded comrade, and in the most poignant scene, a man examines a child's tunic for fleas. A moment of such quiet, domestic intimacy it feels almost shockingly human. This single object encapsulates their entire universe, the wild, spiritual chaos of the steppe framing the peaceful, ordinary moments of their lives. Another stunning piece, the golden comb from Soloka, freezes a moment of high drama. It shows 3 warriors on foot and on horseback, their bodies straining in a desperate battle. Their detailed armor, their expressions of grim determination, and the fallen horse at the center tell a complete story of conflict and valor in a space no larger than your hand. Where did all this gold come from? The Scythians likely sourced the raw metal from the Ural Mountains, but their wealth also flowed from their control of trade routes. They acted as middlemen, ferrying goods like Siberian furs and Central Asian spices to the Greek colonies on the Black Sea, receiving gold, fine wine, and luxurious pottery in return. Greek craftsmen living in those coastal cities often produced these very objects, but they worked to a Scythian blueprint, blending Hellenic technique with the powerful, symbolic demands of their nomadic patrons. But these treasures were not for display in a palace, they were meant for the grave. A Scythian aristocrat was buried with a king's ransom in gold, not as a hoard to be admired, but as a functional toolkit for the afterlife. Every golden plaque sewn onto their clothing, every heavy torque around their neck, and every intricate comb in their possession was a declaration of their identity, their power, and their divine right to rule, a status they intended to carry with them into the world of the spirits. This opulence was the bedrock of their social hierarchy, proving that their power was granted by the gods and secured by their own unmatched prowess on the battlefield. The sheer power of Scythian gold was forged not in a workshop but in the saddle. Their entire civilization was built upon a revolutionary partnership with the horse, a bond so complete it redefined warfare in the ancient world. The Scythian was a centaur in spirit, his identity fused with his mount. He rode a very specific kind of horse, the small but incredibly sturdy steppe pony. These animals were not the tall, graceful breeds you might envision from later nights. They were tough, shaggy-maned creatures, bred for endurance over countless generations to survive the harsh winters and scorching summers of the grasslands. They could travel vast distances on minimal forage, making them the perfect engine for a nomadic empire. but the true genius of the Scythian rider lay in his equipment. They invented the first true saddle, a simple yet revolutionary framework of two leather cushions stuffed with deer or horse hair strapped to the pony's back. This was not just for comfort, it was a fundamental tool of control. It gave the rider a stable platform, a solid base from which he could stand in his stirrups to fire his bow in any direction, even while riding at a full gallop. This combination of saddle and stirrup, which would not appear in Western Europe for over 1,000 years, granted the Scythian a stability that was nothing short of supernatural to the armies that faced them. Their primary weapon was a masterpiece of engineering, the composite recurve bow. Crafted from a lethal sandwich of wood, sinew, and horn, it was a weapon designed for power and speed. The sinew on the back excelled under tension, while the horn on the belly handled compression, storing immense energy. Its recurved shape, curving away from the archer when unstrung, meant it could be short enough to manage on horseback, yet when drawn, it unleashed the power of a much larger bow. A Scythian warrior could carry a quiver holding up to 200 arrows, and from the back of a galloping horse, he could accurately fire them in any direction, even backwards in the famous Parthian shot. This created a whirlwind of death on the battlefield. Imagine facing a cloud of mounted archers who never actually charged your lines. They would simply swarm around your formation, a swirling, unstoppable storm of arrows. Their signature tactic was the feigned retreat, a maneuver that preyed upon the discipline and frustration of their enemies. They would attack, shower an infantry phalanx with arrows, and then appear to break and flee in disarray. The opposing commander, seeing an opportunity for victory, would order a pursuit, but the Scythians were not running. They were drawing their enemy in, stretching their formations into vulnerable, disorganized lines. Then from the saddle, they would turn and fire backwards, cutting down the pursuers without ever engaging in hand-to-hand combat. Against the slow, heavily armored infantry of empires like Persia or Assyria, this was an almost magical form of warfare. They controlled the pace, the range, and the very terms of the battle. This unparalleled mobility allowed them to appear as if from nowhere, strike with devastating force, and vanish back into the endless steppe, leaving only dust and confusion in their wake. The construction of this bow was a work of art and science, a symphony of materials harvested from the very animals they hunted. A core of flexible wood, often maple, formed its backbone. To the back of the bow, the side facing away from the archer, skilled hands glued layers of animal sinew. Sinew is incredibly elastic, storing tremendous energy like a coiled spring when the bowstring was drawn. On the belly of the bow, the side facing the archer, they fixed plates of animal horn which excel under compression. These three layers, wood, sinew, and horn, were laminated together with a powerful fish bladder glue, creating a single, unified weapon of extraordinary resilience. The process could take a year or more, as the glue had to cure slowly and perfectly, making each bow a priceless heirloom. The result was the recurve shape curving away from the archer at each tip. This design was the secret to its compact power. A shorter bow was essential for maneuvering on horseback, but a short, straight bow would have limited range and punch. The recurve shape effectively gave the bow a longer power stroke in a shorter package, unleashing an arrow with enough force to pierce armor at distances of over 150 meters. Compare this to the simple self-bows used by many of their enemies, carved from a single stave of wood. Those were adequate for hunting, but in the hands of a Scythian rider, the composite bow was a force multiplier. It was the difference between a hand-thrown rock and a bullet fired from a rifle. This technological leap granted them a battlefield advantage that settled empires could not counter. An Assyrian infantryman, struggling with a long, unwieldy bow, could only watch as a cloud of Scythian horsemen circled just outside his effective range, each one capable of launching a storm of deadly arrows without ever breaking stride. This was not a fair fight, it was a revolution in warfare, and for centuries the Scythians were its undisputed masters. This mastery of the bow and saddle translated directly into a devastating form of combat. The Scythians did not fight to conquer territory in the traditional sense, they fought to dominate and survive. Their entire tactical doctrine was built around one principle, the absolute refusal of a pitched battle. Why would they stand in a static line against a heavily armored phalanx when their strength was the open plain? Their strategy was one of relentless harassment, a war of constant motion designed to frustrate, exhaust, and ultimately shatter their enemy. They would swarm an advancing column like a cloud of stinging insects, their horse archers unleashing volleys of arrows from just beyond effective range. When the enemy charged, they would melt away, only to reform and attack from another angle moments later. This was more than a tactic, it was a form of psychological torture, grinding down the morale of soldiers who could never bring their superior numbers or heavier arms to bear. When faced with an existential threat like the immense Persian invasion under King Darius, they perfected this into a strategy of total denial. They simply retreated deeper into the endless steppe, leaving nothing of value for the invaders to capture. They poisoned wells and burned the grasslands behind them, turning their own homeland into a weapon. Darius' army, a magnificent force built for set-piece battles, found itself chasing ghosts across a barren, burning landscape, its supply lines stretched to the breaking point. In the end, the great king was forced to retreat with nothing to show for his campaign but colossal losses, a stunning victory for the Scythians achieved without a single major battle. While the horse archers formed the swirling, lethal core of their army, they were not the only component. For the decisive moment when an enemy was already broken and disorganized, the Scythians unleashed their shock troops, heavily armored lancers. These warriors, often the nobility, carried long, heavy spears and were protected by scale armor made of iron or bronze plates sewn onto leather. Their charge was the final hammer blow, crashing into reeling enemy formations and turning a rout into a massacre. But the warfare did not end with arrows and lances. The Scythians were masters of psychological intimidation long before the first arrow was ever fired. Ancient historians describe them as emitting terrifying war cries, a cacophony of shrieks and howls meant to sound less than human. They also practiced a grisly form of trophy collecting. A warrior would often take the scalp of a fallen foe, sewing them into cloaks or using them as napkins, a brutal and very public display of their prowess. Some sources even claim they would skin the entire right arm of a dead enemy, fashioning the gruesome trophy into a quiver cover. Can you imagine the chilling effect of facing an army whose soldiers were adorned with the remains of your own countrymen? This was not mere brutality, it was a calculated effort to instill a primal fear, to make an opponent believe they were fighting demons, not men. The goal was to win the battle before it even began by breaking the enemy's will to fight. The ultimate test of their military doctrine came not from a rival tribe, but from the most powerful man in the known world. King Darius I of Persia ruled an empire that stretched from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea, a realm of unimaginable wealth and immense, disciplined armies. To this god-king, the Scythian tribes were an intolerable nuisance, a pack of wolves harrying the northern frontiers of his perfect empire. Their constant raids were a challenge to his divine authority, and their untamed land represented the last great frontier to be conquered. So around 513 years before the Common Era, Darius assembled a colossal force. Ancient sources claim it numbered 700,000 men, a figure that is surely an exaggeration, but it speaks to the sheer, overwhelming scale of the invasion. This was not a raiding party, it was the entire crushing weight of a superpower marching north to teach the nomads a final lesson. Darius ordered a monumental bridge of boats to be constructed across the Danube River, the symbolic boundary between the settled world and the wild steppe. His army, a glittering river of men, horses, and siege engines, poured across it and into the Scythian Sea of Grass. They marched in, expecting to find cities to sack, armies to crush, and a king to humble. They found nothing but the wind and an endless, empty horizon. The Scythians had simply vanished, but they were watching. Their scouts, invisible on the distant rises, tracked every clumsy movement of the Persian host. Instead of offering the decisive battle Darius craved, the Scythian chieftains made a radical decision. They would give the Persians nothing to fight and nothing to take. The campaign that followed was a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare, a slow, deliberate unraveling of a giant. The Scythian cavalry became a shadow, constantly hovering just at the edge of the Persian vision. They would launch sudden, sharp attacks on the flanks of the column, firing volleys of arrows before dissolving back into the landscape. When Darius' cavalry gave chase, they would lead them into ambushes or simply tire them out in a futile pursuit across trackless miles. The Scythians were not trying to win a battle, they were trying to win a war of attrition. They implemented a scorched earth policy with ruthless efficiency. Pastures that could have fed the Persian horses were set ablaze. Wells that could have quenched the thirst of the immense army were filled with debris or poisoned. The Persians found themselves in a barren, hostile land, marching deeper and deeper into a trap of emptiness. Frustration began to gnaw at the great king. He sent angry messages to the Scythian king, Idantheus, demanding he either stand and fight or submit and offer gifts of earth and water. The legendary reply came back, "If you wish to know why we will not fight, look at the tombs of our ancestors. Find them and try to destroy them, then you will see whether we will fight for the graves of our forefathers. As for your claim to be our master, we recognize no master but the gods." The message was a brilliant psychological blow, a declaration that the Scythians fought for something Darius could never understand or conquer. Their homeland was not a place on a map, it was the memory in their kurgans and the freedom in their saddles. Weeks turned into months. The Persian army, designed for swift, decisive campaigns, was being bled dry. Their supplies dwindled, their morale plummeted, and sickness began to spread through the ranks. They were chasing phantoms, exhausting themselves in a land that offered them no sustenance and no victory. Finally, facing the complete destruction of his army without a single significant engagement, Darius the Great, the King of Kings, was forced to admit defeat. Under the cover of darkness, leaving his sick and wounded behind to campfires that burned as a deceptive rear guard, he ordered a full, humiliating retreat back across the Danube. The most powerful army in the world had been defeated not by a rival empire, but by a strategy of nothingness, by a people who understood that sometimes the greatest power lies in the refusal to fight on your enemy's terms. The Scythians had protected their world without ever forming a battle line, proving that the open steppe was the only fortress they would ever need. The Danube was not the only frontier where the Scythian world collided with a settled civilization. To the south, along the sun-drenched northern coast of the Black Sea, a string of prosperous Greek colonies thrived. Cities like Olbia and Chersonesos became bustling ports of call, islands of Mediterranean culture perched on the edge of the endless steppe. Here, two vastly different worlds met, not just as enemies across a battlefield, but as neighbors across a marketplace. This was a relationship built on a delicate and often contradictory foundation of mutual need and deep-seated mistrust. The Greeks, with their vineyards and pottery workshops, craved the raw wealth of the hinterlands. The Scythians, masters of the inland plains, developed a taste for the refined luxuries of the south. It was a classic exchange. Greek merchant ships arrived laden with amphorae of wine, exquisite painted pottery, and delicate olive oil. In return, the Scythians provided the grain harvested by their settled tribesmen from the fertile Ukrainian river valleys, along with priceless bundles of Siberian furs and, tragically, human captives taken in tribal wars to be sold as slaves. This trade created a fascinating economic symbiosis, but it was a partnership always balanced on the edge of a knife. The Scythians viewed these walled cities with a mixture of desire and contempt. They were sources of wonderful goods, yet they represented a sedentary, confined way of life that was the very opposite of their own nomadic freedom. This tension frequently boiled over into violence. Greek historians record numerous occasions when Scythian armies, perhaps feeling cheated in a deal or simply seeing an opportunity, would appear outside the walls of Olbia to lay siege, demanding tribute or plunder. Yet, in a stunning paradox, these same Scythian warriors were also sought after as the ultimate mercenaries. Greek cities, fighting their own internecine wars, would pay handsomely to have Scythian horse archers in their ranks. Can you picture the scene? A phalanx of Greek hoplites, their bronze armor gleaming, standing beside a band of tattooed Scythians on their shaggy ponies, their bows at the ready. It was a military odd couple, but on the battlefield their combined strengths were devastating. The most remarkable fusion, however, occurred not in war but in art. Scythian chieftains, flush with wealth from trade and tribute, developed a sophisticated demand for gold. They did not want Greek-style statues of gods, however. They wanted their own symbols, their own spiritual language, rendered with Greek technical perfection. They would bring raw gold to the workshops of Greek goldsmiths in cities like Panticapaeum and commission their most important objects. The result was a breathtaking hybrid style. A Greek artisan, trained to value realistic human proportion and flowing drapery, would now be tasked with hammering out a golden panther coiled into an impossible spiral, its muscles bulging with a supernatural energy it never learned from a Greek model. This cultural collaboration produced some of the most iconic Scythian treasures ever found. The famous golden comb from Soloka, with its vivid battle scene, was almost certainly the work of a Greek master. The same is true for the golden pectoral, its central band of peaceful Scythians rendered with a Hellenic eye for realistic detail, while the outer bands erupt with the pure, chaotic energy of the animal style. This was not a case of one culture conquering another. It was a dialogue, a negotiation between two powerful artistic traditions, creating something entirely new and magnificent. The Scythian elite were not just buying status symbols, they were commissioning a new visual identity, one that used the finest techniques of the civilized world to proclaim the untamed power of the steppe. Power was the true currency of the steppe, and Scythian society was its most carefully guarded ledger. This was not a world of equals, but a rigid pyramid built on strength, honor, and the relentless demands of survival. At its peak sat the kings and paramount chieftains, figures of almost divine authority. Their power was absolute, their word was law across the vast confederation of tribes. A king was not just a political leader, he was the chief priest and the supreme warlord, the living link between his people and the gods of the sky and wind. His wealth, pulled from trade and tribute, was legendary, but it was not for hoarding in a palace. It was for display in life and for taking to the grave, a public and eternal affirmation of his right to rule. The staggering golden treasures from kurgans like Kul Oba were not merely gifts to the gods, they were a political statement in metal, proving that his lineage was favored by the spirits and that his power would endure beyond death. Below these royal figures were the regional chieftains and the noble warriors, the landed gentry of the grassland. These men commanded smaller bands of fighters and controlled specific grazing territories. Their status was earned and constantly reaffirmed through their prowess in battle and the hunt. They were the officers of the Scythian war machine, the ones who led the swirling cavalry charges and the decisive lance assaults. A man's place in this elite class was not a birthright he could take for granted. It was a prize he had to prove himself worthy of year after year. How do you maintain such a strict hierarchy in a society with no written laws or permanent cities? The answer lies in a culture of relentless performance. From childhood, a Scythian boy was trained for one primary purpose: to become a warrior. His entire upbringing was a prolonged audition for a place among the respected men of the tribe. He learned to ride before he could walk confidently, to track animals across featureless plains, and to fire his composite bow with deadly accuracy from the back of a galloping horse. His first kill, whether in the hunt or in battle, was a crucial rite of passage, a moment that began to define his identity and his value to the community. There was no room for weakness in this world. A man who showed cowardice or incompetence could find himself and his family stripped of their status, their herds, and their place in the tribal structure. This constant pressure to perform created a self-policing society where the fear of dishonor was a more powerful motivator than any written legal code. The backbone of this entire system was the warrior class itself. These were not conscripted farmers handed a spear. They were professional fighters whose entire lives revolved around the mastery of arms and the art of war. Their social standing, their right to speak in tribal gatherings, and their share of the spoils from raids were all directly tied to their military achievements. A successful warrior, adorned with golden plaques and fine weapons, was a walking advertisement for the system's rewards. He proved that the path to prestige was open to any man with enough skill and courage. This created a fierce competition among the warriors, each one striving to outdo the others in acts of bravery, to take more trophies, and to claim a larger portion of the wealth. This competitive drive ensured that the Scythian military remained sharp, motivated, and terrifyingly effective. Supporting this warrior elite was the vast class of commoners. These were the nomadic herders who tended the vast flocks of sheep, cattle, and horses that formed the economic foundation of Scythian life. There were also the farmers who settled in river valleys to grow grain, which became a crucial trade commodity with the Greeks. And there were the craftspeople, the unsung masters who fashioned the bows, felt the tents, and carved the intricate wooden objects found in the frozen tombs. While they did not enjoy the high status of the warriors, they were free people, essential to the survival and prosperity of the tribe. Their labor freed the warrior class to focus entirely on training, raiding, and defense. At the very bottom of this social ladder were the slaves. These were almost always captives taken in raids on neighboring tribes or from settled communities. Their lives were ones of utter servitude, with no rights and no prospect of freedom. They performed the most menial tasks, from tending to the herds to serving in the households of chieftains. In a grim final act of ownership, they were sometimes sacrificed to accompany their masters into the afterlife, a practice confirmed by the multiple bodies found in royal kurgans. This rigid structure, from the divine king to the enslaved captive, was the engine of the Scythian world. It was a society perfectly adapted to its environment, where every individual had a role defined by their contribution to the collective strength and survival of the tribe. A man was what he could prove himself to be on the open plain, with a bow in his hand and the wind at his back. The rigid hierarchy of Scythian society was mirrored by an equally structured, yet far more mysterious spiritual world. For these nomads, the entire universe was alive with spirit. Every mountain, every stream, and every animal possessed a consciousness that could be communicated with, a belief system we call animism. This was not a religion of temples and scripture, but a direct personal engagement with the forces of nature, mediated by a remarkable class of spiritual guides known as the Inaris. At the head of their pantheon stood a goddess who might seem surprising for a culture of fierce warriors, Tabiti, the keeper of the hearth. She was the protector of the home, the family, and the sacred fire that burned in every felt tent. Her prominence reveals a core Scythian truth, that their strength was rooted in the stability of the clan and the warmth of the communal fire, the one constant in a life of constant motion. Yet, alongside this domestic divinity, they worshipped a god of raw, untamed power, a figure the Greeks identified with their own Ares. This was the spirit of the blade and the battle cry, the divine patron of the warrior elite. His shrines were not ornate buildings, but simple, towering piles of brushwood, atop which an ancient iron sword, the symbol of his power, was placed. To this shrine they offered sacrifices of cattle and horses, and in grimmer times, one in every 100 prisoners of war, a practice that shocked their civilized neighbors but underscored the absolute life-or-death seriousness of their pact with the god of war. How did one speak to such powerful and diverse spirits? The answer lies with the Inaris. These were not ordinary priests, they were shamans who moved between the worlds of the seen and the unseen. Herodotus describes them as a distinct class, and he notes something that made them utterly unique. Many were what he called androgynous, adopting female roles, clothing, and speech. In the eyes of the Scythians, this liminal state, this existence between masculine and feminine, granted them a unique spiritual power, allowing them to interpret the will of the gods with special clarity. Their most important tool for crossing into the spirit realm was a powerful intoxicant, cannabis. Herodotus gives us a vivid picture of their rituals. He writes that the Scythians would take the seeds of this plant and throw them onto red-hot stones inside a small, felt-covered tent. The seeds would smolder, producing a thick, aromatic vapor far stronger than smoke. The Inaris would then sit inside this enclosed space, inhaling the vapors until they were swept away in a trance, howling with what they believed was holy joy. In this altered state, they believed they could travel to the spirit world, receive prophecies about the future, diagnose illnesses, and perform healing miracles. For a people living at the mercy of nature and war, the ability to foresee a harsh winter or an enemy attack was priceless. The Inaris were the spiritual backbone of the tribe, the interpreters of dreams and the omens of the natural world. This profound belief in a world beyond our own reached its ultimate expression in death. The staggering effort they put into their burial mounds, the kurgans, was not just about honoring the dead, it was a practical necessity for the journey ahead. They believed in a vibrant afterlife that was a reflection of their earthly one, and a person would need all their tools, status, and companions to navigate it successfully. This is why a chieftain was buried with his finest weapons, his golden regalia, and a cauldron filled with food. This is why they sacrificed his favorite horses and sometimes even his loyal servants. These were not acts of cruelty, but of profound belief. They were ensuring the chieftain would arrive in the next world as a powerful leader, mounted on his steed and surrounded by his retinue, able to continue his exalted existence forever. The tattoos covering the skin of the Ice Maiden and the Pazyric chieftain were not merely decoration. They were a permanent spiritual passport, a map of animal spirits and mythical guides to aid them in the afterlife. Every golden plaque, every sacrificed horse, and every drop of intoxicating vapor was part of a single, coherent vision, a bridge between the mortal world of the steppe and the eternal realm of the spirits. This obsession with power and the spirit world bled directly onto the battlefield in one of their most visceral rituals. For a Scythian warrior, the ultimate proof of his courage was not just a victory, but a physical token he could carry home. After a battle, a warrior would seek out the body of the first man he had slain. In a ritual that seems shocking to us, he would then kneel and drink the blood of his fallen foe. This was not an act of random savagery, but a deeply symbolic gesture. By consuming the enemy's blood, the warrior believed he was absorbing their strength, their vital force, making their power his own. It was the first step in claiming a trophy that would define his status. That trophy was the man's head. The warrior would sever the head and present it to his chieftain or king. This presentation was crucial. It was his receipt, the only way to claim his rightful portion of the plunder from the raid. Without this grim proof, he would receive nothing. His share of the loot, his standing among the other warriors, his very honor depended on that severed head. But the ritual did not end there. The warrior would then take the head and carefully remove the scalp, often using a small knife to make a circular cut and then peeling the skin and hair away in one piece. This scalp became a personal trophy, a permanent record of his kill. He would cure the skin, sometimes stretching it over a small wooden frame, and hang it from his horse's bridle as a grisly decoration that clattered with every stride. When he had collected enough, he might even sew them together into a cloak or a quiver, a wearable chronicle of his battles that rustled with the ghosts of his enemies. Can you envision the psychological impact of facing a warrior whose clothing was made from the faces of men you might have known? This practice served multiple purposes in their harsh world. It was a brutal but effective accounting system for distributing wealth. It was a public resume of a man's martial prowess, so no one could doubt his claims. And on a spiritual level, it was a form of spiritual conquest. By taking the head and scalp, they were not just killing an enemy, they were capturing their identity and power. Some beliefs suggest they thought this act prevented the enemy's vengeful spirit from pursuing them, trapping their essence in the physical trophy. What we see as grotesque, they saw as necessary, a complete system that transformed the horror of combat into a currency of honor, a shield against ghosts, and a testament to a life lived by the sword. The same Greek writers who spun tales of Scythian ferocity also told stories of another, even more mythical people, the Amazons. These were the fierce warrior women of legend, a tribe who lived without men, cutting off a breast to better draw their bows. For centuries, this was dismissed as pure fantasy, a cautionary tale created by a patriarchal society. But archaeology has now delivered a stunning verdict. The Amazons were not a myth, they were a memory. The Greeks were almost certainly describing the real Scythian and Sarmatian women they encountered on the steppe. Across the vast expanse of the Scythian world, from the Danube to the Altai, excavators have opened hundreds of burial mounds to find a site that would have shocked Herodotus himself. These are the graves of women, but they are not filled with spindles and jewelry boxes. They are warriors' tombs. The skeletons lie surrounded by the full arsenal of steppe combat. A bronze quiver holds dozens of iron-tipped arrows. An iron dagger rests near the hip, and a long, heavy spear lies alongside the body. In some graves, the women were even buried with their armor, scales of iron or bronze sewn onto leather, ready for battle. The evidence becomes even more visceral when you examine the bones. One young woman, buried with a quiver of 40 arrows, shows clear signs of a violent death. Her skull bears the mark of an axe blow, and a bronze arrowhead was found embedded deep in her knee. This was not a woman who died in her tent. She fell in combat, fighting alongside her male counterparts. The most famous example, the Siberian Ice Maiden, fits this pattern perfectly. She was found not with a warrior's weapons, but with a headdress of immense spiritual power and a pouch of cannabis for ritual use. Yet her body showed the distinct skeletal markers of a life spent on horseback, and her tattoos depicted the same mythical beasts that adorned male warriors. She was likely a high-ranking figure, a priestess or a storyteller, but her life was still one of action and mobility, a far cry from the secluded existence of a Greek or Persian noblewoman. Does this mean every Scythian woman was a warrior? Probably not. Just as with men, there would have been a division of roles, with many women managing the herds, crafting goods, and raising families. But the key difference is one of possibility. For a Scythian girl, the path of the warrior was open. Her society did not forbid her from learning the bow or riding to war. If she had the skill and the courage, she could earn a status and a burial equal to that of a man. This level of gender equality in the martial sphere was simply unimaginable in the contemporary Greco-Roman world, where a woman's life was almost entirely confined to the private sphere of the home. The legend of the Amazons was not a Greek invention. It was a Greek reaction, an attempt to make sense of a reality they could scarcely comprehend. A world where women could be lords of the bow and masters of the horse, fighting as equals in the endless dance of life and death on the steppe. But no empire of the steppe, no matter how brilliant, could outrun the relentless tide of time. Just as the Scythians had once emerged from the vastness of the east, a new wave of Iranic horsemen began to gather on the horizon. These were the Sarmatians, the heirs to the steppe, and their arrival would herald the final chapter of Scythian dominance. From around the 4th century before the Common Era, these powerful confederations started to move westward from their homelands deep in Central Asia, pressing against the eastern frontiers of the Scythian world. They were not a foreign invasion in the traditional sense, but rather close cousins, sharing a similar language, a nomadic lifestyle, and a deep mastery of the horse. Yet they brought with them a new way of war that would forever change the balance of power on the grasslands. While the Scythians had perfected the art of the swift, swirling horse archer, the Sarmatians introduced a revolutionary and terrifying new warrior, the cataphract. Picture a rider and his horse encased from head to hoof in interlocking scales of iron or bronze, a living fortress on four legs. This armored behemoth wielded not a composite bow, but a massive two-handed lance called a contus. This was not a weapon for skirmishing at a distance. It was a sledgehammer designed for one purpose: to smash through enemy formations with the sheer, unstoppable weight of a full gallop charge. The Sarmatians still used horse archers, of course, but their cataphracts represented a fundamental shift in battlefield doctrine, from the swift, elusive strike to the decisive, shattering blow. This new military technology was matched by a distinct material culture. Their art, while still rooted in the animal style, often featured a new emphasis on polished gems and a different, more geometric approach to metalwork. Their burial mounds, while similar to Scythian kurgans, contain these signature long lances and the remains of horses clad in scale armor, painting a clear picture of their martial identity. The decline of the Scythians was not a sudden, dramatic collapse, but a slow, inexorable process of pressure, assimilation, and replacement. The Sarmatians did not simply conquer the Scythians in a single great war. Instead, they pushed them from their eastern grazing lands, tribe by tribe, forcing a westward contraction. Some Scythian groups were likely absorbed into the growing Sarmatian confederations, their warriors taking up the long lance and scale armor. Others were pushed into smaller, more defensible territories, like the Crimean Peninsula, where a rump Scythian kingdom would linger for centuries, increasingly reliant on fortified settlements and trade with the Greek cities, slowly losing their nomadic character. The political entity that had once terrified Persia and defied Darius gradually faded, its power and influence leaching away into the rising Sarmatian tide. This transition was not an extinction but an evolution. The Sarmatians became the new masters of the western steppe, carrying forward the nomadic legacy of their Scythian predecessors while imprinting it with their own unique and formidable identity. The age of the swift, tattooed horse archer was giving way to the age of the armored lancer, a changing of the guard on the endless sea of grass. The final decline of the Scythians was a slow fading, not a sudden fall. While the Sarmatian pressure from the east was a constant, grinding force, new and powerful enemies were rising in the west. The balance of power on the steppe was tilting irrevocably. Just as the Sarmatians introduced a new form of heavy cavalry, the Macedonian kingdom under Philip II perfected the art of combined arms warfare. His son, Alexander the Great, would go on to topple the Persian Empire, and his ambitions cast a long shadow. Though Alexander himself never marched against the Scythian heartland, one of his generals, a man named Cyprian, led a significant force of 30,000 men against the Scythian stronghold of Olbia around the year 331 before the Common Era. The details are sparse, but the outcome was a disaster for the invaders. The Scythians, likely employing their timeless tactics of harassment and scorched earth, annihilated Cyprian's entire army. It was a final, defiant victory that echoed their triumph over Darius centuries before, but it was also a sign of a changing world. Larger, more organized military machines were now probing their borders, and while the Scythians could still win defensive wars, their ability to project power was waning. Some historians also point to a more silent enemy: environmental change. A gradual shift towards a colder, drier climate could have shrunk the precious pastures that supported their vast herds of horses and cattle. For a civilization built on mobility and grass, even a slight ecological shift could have been catastrophic. weakening their economic foundation and making them more vulnerable to external threats. The Scythian Confederation began to fracture under this multi-front pressure. The core of their territory in what is now Ukraine was steadily eroded. Some tribes were conquered and absorbed by the advancing Sarmatians. Others were pushed into isolated enclaves like the Crimean Peninsula, where a small Scythian kingdom, now more settled and reliant on fortifications, lingered for several more centuries, a fading echo of their former steppe glory. They became clients and sometimes antagonists of the Greek Bosporan kingdom, their nomadic spirit slowly diluted by a more sedentary existence. The final blows came from later migratory waves. The Goths, sweeping down from the north, overran the last Scythian remnants in Crimea. Later still, the whirlwind of the Hunnic migration swept across the same grasslands, absorbing the descendants of both Scythians and Sarmatians into their vast, turbulent empire. So the Scythians did not vanish in a single dramatic event. They were gradually dissolved, their people intermarrying with a succession of new masters, their distinct tribal identity slowly blending into the genetic and cultural tapestry of the region. Yet to say they disappeared is a profound misunderstanding. Their legacy was far too powerful to simply evaporate. The Sarmatians who replaced them carried forward their equestrian traditions and their artistic motifs. The Goths and the Huns adopted the core tactics of steppe warfare that the Scythians had perfected. The very model of the horse archer, the master of the composite bow and the feigned retreat, became the standard for every nomadic empire that followed. Their genetic imprint remains in the populations of Ukraine, Russia, and Central Asia. Most importantly, their story, once just a whisper from frozen tombs and Greek texts, now stands fully revealed. They were the first great masters of the Eurasian steppe, a people who proved that an empire could be built on movement and mastery, leaving behind a golden, ghostly imprint on the wind. The hidden history of the Scythians is now being written in a language far older than Greek texts or golden artifacts, the language of DNA. Archaeogenetics, the science of extracting ancient genetic material from bones and teeth, is unlocking the final kurgan, the one built inside the cells of the Scythians themselves. This cutting-edge field allows us to read the biological story they carried with them, and it is completely rewriting our understanding of who they were. The first and most profound revelation is that the Scythians were never a single, homogeneous race of people. Their genetic code reveals a stunning mosaic, a tapestry of ancestries woven across the vastness of the steppe. The DNA from kurgans in the Altai Mountains tells a different story than the DNA from burials near the Black Sea. Some individuals show deep roots in East Asia, while others carry strong genetic links to populations in Europe and the Caucasus. This was not a closed tribe, but a dynamic, open network. Their confederation was a genetic melting pot, forged not by purity, but by connection. Can you picture the constant flow of people, ideas, and alliances across those thousands of miles of grassland? Their genes are the proof of that endless interaction. This genetic data also lets us look into their faces with newfound clarity. By analyzing specific markers, scientists can now make educated predictions about their physical appearance. The classic Scythian likely had a complexion ranging from light to intermediate, with brown or black hair and often eyes of brown or hazel. They were a people adapted to the harsh light and extreme climates of their world. But DNA tells more personal stories too. It reveals the scars of their lives. Analysis of skeletal remains shows evidence of diseases like brucellosis, likely contracted from their close contact with livestock, causing fevers and chronic pain. We can also trace family trees in the soil. In one burial mound, genetic tests confirmed that several warriors interred together were close relatives, perhaps a father and his sons or a band of brothers, laying to rest the romantic notion that all war bands were just bands of mercenaries. They fought and died alongside their own blood. This brings us to the most enduring question of all: what became of them? Did they truly vanish without a trace? The answer lies in the genes of millions of people alive today. The Scythian genetic signature did not disappear, it simply dissolved into the populations that followed. When you look at the people of the Caucasus, of Central Asia, and of Eastern Europe, you are seeing the living descendants of the steppe. Their legacy is written in the DNA of the Ossetians in the Caucasus, whose language still holds echoes of the ancient Scythian tongue. It flows in the veins of the Kazakhs and the Kyrgyz, whose nomadic pastoral traditions are a direct inheritance from that distant past. It is present across Ukraine and southern Russia, a subtle but permanent thread in the genetic fabric of the region. The Scythians were not a people who died out, they were a people who blended in, their warrior spirit and nomadic blood becoming one with the very land they once ruled. The thick, aromatic smoke that filled the small felt tent was a gateway to the gods. Herodotus described a profound ritual of purification that followed the intense mourning of a Scythian funeral. After the dead were laid to rest in the great kurgan, the living would seek to cleanse themselves, to wash away the spiritual contamination of death. They would gather and erect a small, enclosed tent, carefully sealing its seams. Inside, they placed a basin of red-hot stones, their surfaces glowing with a fierce heat. Then, with a reverent hand, they would cast handfuls of cannabis seeds onto the stones. The seeds would not burn with a flame, but instead smolder and pop, releasing a thick, potent vapor that quickly saturated the enclosed space. The Scythians would then sit within this herbal sauna, inhaling the intoxicating clouds deeply, their bodies absorbing the plant's power until they were swept away in a collective trance, howling with what the historian called a holy joy. For centuries, this account was viewed as one of Herodotus's more fanciful tales, a traveler's exaggeration of a foreign custom. But the frozen ground of the Persian kurgans would one day offer stunning confirmation. Archaeologists excavating these tombs discovered small, portable tents buried alongside the chiatines. Within these tents, they found bronze cauldrons filled with stones and, most tellingly, a residue of burnt cannabis seeds clinging to the interior. The physical evidence matched the ancient story with perfect, almost eerie precision. This was not mere recreation or intoxication, it was a sacred technology. The Scythians believed the veil between the world of the living and the spirit world was thinnest in the presence of death, and that the cannabis vapor acted as a key to unlock that door. In their howling joy, they were not just delirious, they were communicating. They sought visions of the departed's safe journey, prophecies for the tribe's future, or healing for the sickness and grief that clung to the mourners. The ritual purified the community, reconnecting them to the cosmic order after the profound disruption of a death. It was a rite of passage for the living as much as for the dead, a necessary journey into an altered state to ensure the entire tribe could cross back into the world of the living, cleansed and ready to face the endless horizon once more. The skin of the Scythians was their most personal canvas, a living tapestry of myth and identity. Etched into the flesh of the Persian chieftain and the Siberian ice maiden, we find the same coiled panthers and leaping stags that adorned their golden plaques and felt hangings. This was not mere decoration, it was the animal style rendered in the most intimate medium possible. The process was as brutal as it was beautiful. Using a small bone or metal needle, a skilled artist would puncture the skin, tapping soot-based pigment deep into the dermis. This method, not so different from modern hand-poke techniques, would have been a painful and lengthy ordeal, a testament to the immense cultural value placed on these permanent marks. But why endure such an ordeal? The theories are as complex as the designs themselves. Each tattoo was likely a dense layer of meaning. The specific animals could denote clan affiliation, connecting an individual to a mythical ancestor or a protective totem. A panther might symbolize ferocity, a stag speed and virility. The placement on the body, covering arms, shoulders, and backs, suggests these were public declarations of status and life experience, a visual resume of a person's achievements, lineage, and spiritual journey. Many scholars believe these tattoos also served a powerful apotropaic function as magical armor. By embedding the image of a powerful, mythical beast into their skin, a warrior might have believed they were absorbing its strength and gaining its protection against both physical and spiritual harm. The tattoos were a permanent suit of spiritual armor carried from this life into the next. This transforms these ancient bodies from archaeological specimens into profound personal statements. To see the precise lines and elegant curves on the Ice Maiden's skin is to look directly into her world, to understand that her culture's grand artistic vision was not just for objects, but for the human form itself. It is an incredibly intimate connection across 25 centuries, a whisper of identity that refuses to fade. The Scythians controlled a hidden superhighway long before silk became a common currency in Rome. This was the original Silk Road, a sprawling web of paths and trails that they commanded across the heart of Eurasia. Their mastery of the steppe gave them something more valuable than any single city. It gave them the keys to the continent. They were the indispensable middlemen of the ancient world, connecting the brilliant but distant court of Han China with the bustling Greek emporiums on the Black Sea, and linking the sophisticated workshops of Persia with the fur-rich forests of Siberia. Can you envision the endless caravans moving across that sea of grass, guided and protected by Scythian riders? They were the guarantors of safe passage, and they exacted a heavy price for their services, either in direct tolls or by controlling the trade themselves. Along these routes flowed an astonishing variety of goods. From the east came bales of precious Chinese silk, delicate lacquerware, and fragrant spices. Greek colonies on the Black Sea shipped out finely painted pottery, amphorae brimming with strong wine, and the glittering goldwork that Scythian elites craved. From the south arrived luxurious Persian carpets and intricate metalwork, while the frozen north supplied thick bundles of sable and fox furs. And from their own vast herds and those of their allies came the most vital commodity of all, the tough, reliable steppe horses that were the engines of this entire system. This economic power was the silent partner to their military fame. The wealth that built the golden pectorals and filled the chieftains' kurgans did not come solely from plunder. It flowed from this relentless, organized commerce. They did not just conquer territory, they conquered the pathways of exchange. By taxing every caravan that crossed their domain, they built an economic engine that funded their armies, enriched their nobility, and projected their influence across thousands of miles. This made them a linchpin, the crucial central gear in a machine that connected the great civilizations of the ancient world for the very first time. Their dominance was not just measured in battles won, but in the silent, steady accumulation of wealth that moved along the tracks their horses made in the grass. The thunder of hooves did not fade with the last Scythian king. It simply found new riders. The military and cultural blueprint they perfected on the open steppe became an enduring legacy, a ghost in the machine of every great nomadic empire that followed. The Huns, who swept into Europe under Attila, were not Scythians themselves, but they fought like them. Their terrifying horse archers, masters of the feigned retreat and the composite bow, were using a playbook written 1,000 years earlier. They relied on the same overwhelming mobility, the same psychological terror, and the same refusal to engage in a stand-up fight unless the conditions were perfect. When Roman legions, the finest heavy infantry in the world, faced the Hunnic cavalry, they experienced the same frustration that had broken the Persians, chasing shadows that dissolved into a storm of arrows. The Scythians had proven that a people without cities could humble empires, and the Huns took that lesson to heart, bringing a refined version of steppe warfare to the very gates of Rome. This model of power, built on the saddle and the bow, did not stop there. The Turkic cognates that rose to power after the Huns further institutionalized this way of life. Their political organization, a confederation of tribes united under a single, powerful ruler, was a direct echo of the Scythian royal structure. Their artisans continued to produce art in the vibrant animal style, and their warriors lived and died by the same equestrian code. The steppe was a great teacher, and the Scythians had written its first and most important textbook. This lineage finds its ultimate expression in the most formidable steppe empire of all, the Mongols of Genghis Khan. When the great Khan united the tribes and unleashed his armies across Asia, he was deploying a system that a Scythian chieftain would have recognized instantly. The core of his army was the lightning-fast horse archer, armed with a composite bow that was the direct technological descendant of the Scythian weapon. His strategies of envelopment, harassment, and strategic retreat were the same tactics that had baffled Darius. The Mongols simply scaled them up to a continental level, adding sophisticated siegecraft and a ruthless command structure. Genghis Khan's use of organized hunting parties, the Nurj, to corner and destroy enemies was a direct evolution of the Scythian mastery of the hunt applied to warfare. Can you see the unbroken thread, the golden cord of tradition stretching across 2,000 years? The Scythians were the original architects of this nomadic paradigm. They established the fundamental truth that on the open grasslands, power was not measured in walled cities or written laws, but in the number of mounted archers a leader could command and the vastness of the pastures he controlled. They created the political template of the tribal confederation, flexible enough to absorb new peoples yet strong enough to challenge settled civilizations. In doing so, they became the foundational culture of the nomadic world. Every tremor of hoofbeats from the Xiongnu to the Mongols carried a Scythian echo, a reminder that the first masters of the steppe had forged a way of war and a way of life so effective it would shape the destiny of Asia for millennia. Their world was one of motion and myth, a civilization defined by the horizon and the thunder of hooves. We have journeyed together through the hidden history of the Scythian warriors, from the endless sea of grass to the secrets locked in frozen tombs. We saw how their mastery of the horse and bow made them unstoppable, a whirlwind of mounted archers who could humble the greatest empires of their age. Their identity was etched not just in battle, but in the stunning language of their golden art, where coiled beasts held spiritual power, and in the visceral rituals that transformed the horror of war into a currency of honor. They defied the Persian superpower not with walls, but with the emptiness of the steppe itself, proving that true power could lie in the refusal to fight. For centuries, their story was a whisper from Greek texts until the permafrost gave up its ghosts, revealing tattooed chieftains and the Ice Maiden, their lives preserved in astonishing detail. And now, modern genetics confirms they were a mosaic of peoples, their legacy written in the DNA of millions living today. They were the quintessential steppe nomads, the original architects of a way of life that will be carried forward by the Huns and the Mongols, their echo a constant tremor in the march of history. Their world may have faded, but its mysteries remain, so we turn to you. Which piece of the Scythian puzzle captures your imagination the most? Is it the glittering golden treasures that held the stories of their lives, the revelation of the real warrior women who inspired the Amazon legends, or the hauntingly preserved frozen mummies, their tattoos still speaking a powerful, silent language? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to join more deep dives into the secrets of the past, subscribe and explore the hidden histories waiting to be uncovered.